Approval of monthly human resources report.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson,
Good
members of the
afternoon.
board, Mr. Thurman. The Human Resources Report for the month of September 2014 denotes the employees, the new contracted employees. I'd like to draw your attention to the newly contracted employees, a total of 821 teachers, new non-contracted employees, resignations, although that number appears to be high, 614. Please note that 327 of those individuals are as a result of a purging of substitute/temporary employees. That is something that we do on an annual basis. Terminations as well as other employment status changes. I have also provided for you for the month of September, as of currently posted on our PATS website, we have a total of 63.5 positions. In comparison to other districts, that information is listed below. Please note that of the 63.5 position, 50 have been since the last Board of Education meeting, and those are highlighted in red as we continue to receive those resignations. We post and process those as well as look for high-quality individuals as quickly as possible. That concludes the Human Resources Report for the month of September 2014.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Orson?
Yes, Dr. Ward Smith. Couple of questions for you, and I know, I'm sure we all share some of these concerns. I mean, I look at our total vacancies, and of the systems we're comparing ourselves to, they remain at the highest number of any of those systems. And the next closest system appears to be, I guess, Clayton, in terms of the number, which is a system that is smaller than ours. And this number is also higher than the comparable number in 2013. And needless to say, this is an area where I'm sure I'm not alone, that we get a lot of commentary in terms of the number of vacancies we have compared, just in general, and compared to other systems. And I'd love to get your thoughts, and I then have a specific follow-up question. So.
Yes, sir, Mr. Orson. Once again, if you'll look at the vacancies, you will see that the ones highlighted in red are since the last Board of Education meeting. Please note that many of those are as a result of enrollment gains as well as resignations. If you were to subtract the 50 vacancies, or shall I say the 50 particular postings that were posted since the last Board of Education meeting, you will see that we have staffed roughly the majority, with the exception of about 15 positions. So essentially, as individuals are continuing to resign, some do promotions, others to, as I stated, enrollment gains, where we are shifting based upon district needs. Those vacancies are going to come up and down, but as I stated, we're working as hard as we possibly can to fill those particular vacancies. As far as for other districts and what they are experiencing, relative to the positions which are posted, I can't answer to those, but I can just simply say that within our particular district, we are experiencing some late resignations, and as those resignations come to us, we work as hard as we possibly can to get those particular positions posted and filled.
And I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate the point about some of these are more recent, but in absolute numbers, I mean, unless you're saying we're not making an apples to apples comparison, I think we at least have to start as a starting point that this is an apples to apples comparison. And I think it is troubling that our numbers remain high and that they consistently remain high. And this goes back to even looking at in previous years. I mean, it's just something that I know a year ago we were sitting here having this same conversation, and I don't know the answer. I mean, I defer to the professionals, but I don't think we're getting to the place we need to be, and I don't think anybody can be comfortable with it. And that wasn't my specific follow-up, but the superintendent wanted to address
If I may, let me make sure I understood what you said. Now, how many actual vacancies do we have?
Currently, there are 63.5 posted vacancies.
All right, but how many of them have actually been filled as of today?
That is the actual number, Mr. Thurman, 63.5, and as I stated, of that 63.5, 50 of those particular positions were posted as of the last Board of Education meeting. Please note that due to enrollment gains and losses, we are also shifting some of our current personnel into some of those vacancies. As one of the reasons why I have Dr. Preston here, he's the individual that actually works with me one-to-one to ensure that we get teachers in as quickly as possible. But Mr. Thurman, the answer to your question of that 63.5, those are posted vacancies that we currently have on the web, and I've also included the actual date for which many of those went out, which includes as late as last Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
And I'll continue. We were at this point last year and the year before, and I want to connect Dr. Ward Smith's presentation with the presentation that Dr. Bell just made. When we experience through administration and board decision, right, deficits of unprecedented proportion, and when you don't have the money to invest in maintaining a competitive salary structure, this is the result of that. And DeKalb will continue to be challenged unless or until we now make proper decisions by managing our money and investing not in lawyers but in teachers. This is what it looks like. And it's going to take, Mr. Orson, at least 2 more budget cycles before we reach a point where we can make the proper decisions, and because many of our teachers are just going to make more money. And that's literally nothing I or anybody else can tell a person who's offered a better salary, right, who has a family with bills to be paid. No matter how frustrated we are, people will make decisions that's in the best interest of themselves and their children. Now, we will have a chance going forward to actually do something about it, now that we're beginning to get our fiscal house in order. I've said that we must make investments in protecting and maintaining employment for our, not just our veteran teachers, but our high-quality veteran teachers. You know, you can be here a long time and not be of high quality. So we need to keep our best teachers, right? But in order to do it, this board and this administration will have to put our money where our hearts have always been. Because otherwise, I can't tell a teacher not to go to another district and make $2,000 or $3,000 more dollars, no matter, and it doesn't matter that we're frustrated. If we're not, Tom Murphy told me something, Mr. Chairman, a long time ago. I was a freshman legislator. He said, don't listen to what politicians say, Mike. Watch the money. That demonstrates my level of commitment. We have and Dr. Ward Smith can speak to it. If you look at our salary structure, we looked at it a few weeks ago. When you get to, 5, 6 years, it's hollowed out. And that's the result of decisions, when I said we made as a district. But now we're in a position, through your leadership, to change it.
Mr. Thurman, and then I do have one set of follow-up questions to your point, and I do agree with you because we have looked at that salary structure, and I would like to ask, personal level, if perhaps we could commit ourselves to a timetable to do that kind of review you and I have talked about, because I agree, I think part of our problem, putting all the other issues aside, is that we make ourselves non-competitive with our kind of year 6 to 10, 6 to 12 year teachers, and that has been, even if everything was in place and we were fully funded, everything, we are still, our schedule reflects a competitive disadvantage. But I think while we are continuing to improve our financial order, I'd love to hear a plan for us to actually address the document that's going to drive our salary schedule, and a commitment that, 6 months from now, or whatever it takes, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, that you will bring to us a plan that will help to ameliorate that problem, so that when we have the resources, we can match them to the outcomes that you've talked about.
Thank you. And to her credit, Dr. Ward Smith, very early on, it was back in 2013 when we were still struggling to emerge from the deficit, provided me with the research, right? And on occasion, at least 2 or 3 times every quarter, said, look, we have to address this. And I said it earlier, this is the administration's #1 priority, because that's what the board members have been telling me. The chairman has said, Michael, do something about the salary structure. from the first day he sat in this position. But you can't do it when you're broke. You just can't do it. But now that we're making progress, the 1% COLA this year, the elimination of the furlough days, the next budget that we're working on right now, we must, if the projections that Dr. Bell has provided with us today hold true, we will be able to make those investments that should have been made, that never should have allowed to occur. We'll be able to make a significant difference in turning it around. That's the administration, and I've said it before, Mr. Chairman, that's my number one priority this year. Because otherwise, we will always be back here every year. Because they are going to hire away, what's that, man?
Right.
Our best and our brightest, because they can offer $2,000 or $3,000 more. And no matter, and people love DeKalb, and we love them. But if I got small children, if I have a family, and I used to have a small child, I'm going to do what's in the best interest of my family.
Right.
But we can change it this year because of what Dr. Bell just projected.
Right.
You know, when you got a $30 million fund balance, you can begin to think about making those type of investments. You can't make it when you got a $20 million deficit, and you can't make it when you got $100,000 in your general fund balance. You can't do it.
Right, and I agree with you. My only point is if we can start to be building that plan so that as our resources match it up, because we know the actual salary structure itself is also inhibiting us. The financial pressure we've been under, we just don't compensate according to keeping the best and the brightest. Just my other set of questions, it has to do with where we've had vacancies and where we've been providing substitutes. You know, we all get emails, so the concern, so I ask you, is are we matching and are we having content certified subs, or have we had instances where we haven't been able to do that? And if that's been a problem, do we have a plan to make sure that doesn't repeat itself?
Yes, sir, Mr. Orson. The Division of Human Resources provide for all teachers, all principals, what we call external standard operating procedures. Within those standard operating procedures, we have processes for every particular procedure relative to what the school should experience. In our standard operating procedures, we provide not only the process for requesting and bringing in a long-term substitute. We provided all principals with a listing of more than 400 pages. That was back on the 9th of August, that listed all 1,000 certified as well as non-certified subs within the district. Based upon the standard operating procedure, it states for any long-term vacancy that you may have, you must have a content certified individual in that. We match what we have provided for principals with a listing of individuals, trusting that they will pull from that list to fill any particular vacancy for which they have at that particular time. So essentially, what we do is we prep all the resources and provide those for the principals. It is incumbent upon the principal to look on that list and to contact those particular substitutes who are already employees of the district and bring them in. If in fact there is not anyone listed, then the principal, the procedure is for them to contact their staff and administrator, and we work with them to get someone in place who does have that content certification.
So I just want to be clear here. So there are instances, it sounds like, where we may not have had content certified subs in some of our classrooms, because we had this conversation last year that our goal, even when school opened, that when permanent positions weren't filled, that our goal, and we weren't necessarily talking short-term to long-term, our goal was to have content certified substitutes in every classroom as a bridge till we got permanent. And it's sounding to me, I understand the standard operating procedure, that we may have had instances this year where that turned out not to be the
Yes,
case.
sir.
I'm just trying to judge. People write me, and I'm not taking it face value, but I also want to be able to.
Yes, sir. As
Yes,
stated
okay.
before, according to our standard operating procedure, for day-to-day subs, say for instance, you will not find content. Say for instance, if it's just a day-to-day sub, a day here, a day there, 2 days here, 2 days there. But if it is a vacancy or a position for which we will require someone there for more than a 10-day period of time, we do have a procedure that is passed along to all principals, and we ask that they do follow that particular procedure.
Okay, so my last comment, because I know I've talked a lot. I know other systems goals, even on their short-term subs, and I will refer to our friends in Gwinnett because that's the one I'm most familiar with, is to have content certified subs even for their short-term subs, because of the fact that if you start the year and you don't have content certified subs, those kids particularly if they're on block schedules, are just going to find themselves increasingly behind. I don't mean to diminish the magnitude of the task, but I think in our standard operating procedures, since you referred to that, baking that in there should be at least one of our goals, because I think we're doing a disservice to our kids, because what we anticipate might only be a 1 or 2 day, particularly when we're doing a school opening, unfortunately often expands into a multiple day substitution situation, which we then end up with non-content certified substitutes for probably a period of time that we didn't anticipate.
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Carter?
if I may, just so that I understand a little more clearly, I love the fact that we've got an SOP that's clearly spelled out. My assumption is that that is reviewed when we have our leadership meeting in August, so that all principals are clearly aware of their resources that are available, and the expectation, Mr. Superintendent, that they are using those resources. Could you, and I don't know, Mr. Superintendent, if it's Dr. Ward-Smith, Dr. Thompson, or yourself who can respond to this, what is the process that is used in the district to ensure that principals are availing themselves of those resources in an expeditious manner, such that we would not, as board members, be receiving concerns or complaints from parents that, in fact, they don't have content certified teachers in classroom on day 1 or day 2 at the latest? That's question number 1, and I hate two-part questions this way, but just so it's all out before I forget it, is what will it take for us to move toward Mr. Orson's suggestion that we, in fact, are working with our short-term subs, that they are content certified from the beginning?
I'll start with part 1 of both parts of the question. As it relates to training, we did have our summer leadership conference, I think the last week in July. And during that particular summer leadership conference, we had what we call HR 101. In HR 101, there were 20 tips to a successful school year. That information is posted for all principals, as well as an hour-long presentation that was presented during the summer leadership conference. In addition to that, we provide principals through Dr. Thompson, because all information funnels through one particular medium, but we provide Dr. Thompson with information to send to the principals. Here we are, because we are such a large district, and working with them. The third way in which we support principals is through our leadership academies. Dr. Boza serves as the Director of Leadership Development, and in those different academies, we provide principals with updates, with information relative to not just HR processes, but all processes as a whole. As it relates to the short-term, day-to-day subs, while it would be idealistic to have that short-term individual in there, what we have is a process where principals know short-term we consider under 10 days, and those particular 10 days could be 2 days here, 3 days there. But principals have been placed on notice that if it goes beyond a specified period, generally the 8th or 9th day, they are to work with human resources or to go to the actual list, because that constitutes a vacancy. And from that particular list of certified subs, begin to put those individuals in place. If it's a vacancy from day 1 and they know that they are posting for that, then they can go ahead and pull someone off that list. It doesn't have to be a day-to-day sub. You can say day 1, I want to have a content certified person in there. But generally, the principals work to get those vacancies filled as quickly as possible. So there's not a need to have that content certified individual, but we can certainly place that as a part of our standard operating procedure in order to enhance what we are providing for our students.
Just for clarification, the 10 days, it's 10 days total. So if I've got 2 this week and 2 next week, and then we're good for 2 weeks, and then 4, we're at 8, or is that
consecutive? Once you see that there is a position that is posted, say for instance, if we are notified of the need, and many of our postings go up and come down so fast, that's one of the reasons why I placed the web date here, because you can see generally within 10 to 14 days, we will have that teacher in front of the student once it's posted. But many of the situations that have come thus far was as a result of positions not being posted. But once the positions were posted, took them up, brought them down, and we actually have teachers that we have recommended on many of those postings. So as I stated, consecutively, if there is a position that is posted day 1, for which does not have a certified content area teacher, the principal at that time can pull from the same list, and they can decide whether I'm going to bring in a day-to-day sub and continue to interview with hopes of having somebody in there within 3 or 4 days, or if it's going to take me a little while longer. I know that as a principal, I can go to the list and select a certified content area sub.
May I cut to the chase? We have 137 schools. In the last 2 years, the only 2 that I've been involved in, the problems seem to have been centered in a very small number of schools, maybe 1. And we spent a year working to ensure that some of the issues did not manifest themselves again. This won't happen again. And what board members, parents may not understand, much of this is dependent upon the school level administrators doing what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it. And when they don't, it creates problems. Well, that's on me, but, and Dr. Thompson is up there, but we're not going through this again. It's no way for myself to know that a position is open unless we are notified. And as soon as we are notified, Dr. Ward Smith begins the process to hire someone. But if she doesn't know it, there is no response to be had. And we expect people to do what they're trained to do and expected to do, but apparently that's expecting too much.
Mr. Mayfield, Mr. McMahon, followed by Mr. Mayfield.
Thank you, Chair. And Dr. Ward Smith, if you don't mind walking me through today's sheet, I did access Pat's, and I've looked at the elementary. We're actually lower on Pat's than you've got posted here.
That's because we're filling vacancies as I sit here.
Right. High school, we have more vacancies posted than what we have here. And then, but special ed is what brought to my attention is there's a total of 30 on Pat's, and we've got 17 here. Are there some that are on Pat's that aren't necessarily coded for special ed? And just walk me through that, please.
Yes, sir. Several of the special ed vacancies we have posted for the district, so they're not actually vacancies that are sitting. We post those to get a pool of applicants. That way, when we have positions that come out, that we are actually can pull from that pool as opposed to a principal having to wait to say, post a position for a specific school. So there are some generic postings that we have, and a lot of districts have that. That's to create a pool of applicants. As it relates to numbers which are higher or lower, postings go up and down within maybe I would say every hour. The system refreshes itself. So this is what was recent as of 9 o'clock this morning. So it may have changed, but generally, as I stated, we have several positions for which we have recommendations as I sit, so this number will even change tomorrow.
So the answer on the special ed is that of the 17 you have posted and the 30 that are on here, 13 of those probably are district-wide.
Some of them are district-wide. Some of them we have recommendations already in hand. So when we have recommendations, we pull them off of here because we're processing to get those individuals scheduled for authorization.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And then one last, I appreciate the detail that you give in the positions that are currently we're looking. How would you address the 5 of the 60 that have been posted since April and May of this year?
Right. We are working strategically with those particular principles. Please note that the SID PID, which is the severe and profound, our most severe and profound, are extremely difficult to staff. Also, the culinary arts and the trade and technical ones, the ones that you see there, are also difficult to staff. Those particular positions, we are continuing to work with principals. As far as for the occupational therapy, and trade positions, we are working with Georgia State, who is our partner, and we're looking at modifying some of the requirements there, as DeKalb has been often more stringent in terms of the applicants that we select. We find that we want to go with what the state requires, as well as for others, just continuing to work with those principals to ensure that we get those postings down.
Right, and I appreciate the PIDs, and I mean, Marshall and I went to graduation at Margaret Harris this past year, and what an incredible facility. So
It is.
I support our very unique
Yes.
schools and centers that we have. It's a tremendous asset for the county. But it's just, there's like Spanish teacher or science teacher, which it's a challenge. So I appreciate that, and we continually evolve into an improving system. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Mr. Mayfield?
Dr. Smith, Ward Smith, thank you for the report. I guess my question sort of dovetails from the superintendent's comments, the final comments that he made regarding training school leaders and having expectations that aren't always met. And I want to couple that with the conversation regarding the vacancies and the competitive advantage or the competitive disadvantage, actually, that we might have as it relates to salary. And those two conclusions or those 2 points would lead me to conclude that we might have two problems. And we've sort of couched the vacancy rate sort of in a financial problem. And I'm concerned that whether or not, if your research that the superintendent referenced, that you bring to him quarterly, actually indicates that the salary issue is, in fact, the primary cause for both the vacancy rate and I would add the turnover rate. So my question is, do we need to look beyond the financials, I guess, Mr. Superintendent, and look at management practices and determine what impact they might have on the turnover rate?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Mayfield. Please note that through our strategic planning process, we have actually, in fact, a retention committee. Part of retention is not just simply, as you stated, salary. Retention deals sevenfold with every division in this particular district. We have to have strong leaders. That's where school leadership steps in. We have to have a curriculum which is sound, which is promoted, which can engage students. That's where C&I steps in. Operational effectiveness. You have to ensure that classrooms are well lit, that we have the resources which are necessary. Stepping on into the technology arena, all of the improvements that we have made relative to the smart boards and making sure that we have everything in place. When we get to the end of it, who owns retention? The answer is we all do. Starting with a sound board of education, ensuring that we have the our physical house in order relative to getting teachers the salaries and the compensation for which they deserve. So as Mr. Thurman stated, I brought to him an initial plan when we first started, but in that particular plan is maybe a sevenfold approach to retaining high-quality teachers. We're starting, yes, with salaries, as a number of teachers indicate through their exit interviews. Their reason for departing is that of a salary. But other things that are denoted are simply the organizational effectiveness of the entire district. So that is certainly something that we are addressing, not only with Mr. Thurman, but through our strategic plan as well.
Does that translate into changes in management practice? I understand the need for having those on the radar for the retention plan. And I guess my question is, how do we measure the changes in the management practices that may be contributing to turnover?
Oh, it must be a holistic approach. And I think Dr. Ward Smith, through human resources, they're able to evaluate, not just manage, and management is all of us. It's everyone. And that influences in a major way the employment environment. It's not just either or, but based on our evaluation from SACS, which is an independent analysis of how we're operating from a governance management perspective, as a district, we are progressing and moving in the right direction. And so when Dr. Ward Smith, through surveys and exit interviews and the data that they are able to calculate, we look at all of those to make a determination about whether or not we as a district or as an administration is doing what is necessary, not just to hire, but also to retain quality employees. I am convinced that a major challenge we face is the salary structure. And see, what really happened this year was that school districts, our surrounding districts, actually gave higher cost of living adjustments than we did. Now, they were able to do it not because of the new ad valorem taxes, but they were able to access what? Their fund balances. And they financed it. And a problem that had existed historically became much more severe this year. And we were at a disadvantage because we did not have a fund balance that we could have drawn down another $15 million to turn the 1% into a 2 or 3%. And that, the historical problem, became much, much more severe this year because of that. And so that's, I think, Mr. Mayfield, to your point, and you're absolutely right, what I was referring to is that now we're much better positioned because of the leadership of this board, because of the stability, because we've been able to address some of the structural issues that you referred to. And one of the most severe structural issues we had was a disproportionate amount of money flowing into legal fees. That had become structural. If you look at over a decade, is that a fair way to state, Dr. Bell? It was a structural issue that was generating a significant deficit that eliminated the fund balance. And so when we were in a position where we could give out cost of living, APS, DeKalb, other districts went to the fund balance, funded it, and we couldn't. And it cost us in terms of quality teachers and staff. It just did in a major way. And that's why our decisions have real consequences associated with it. They just do.
No further questions. I want to thank, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Coleman.
Slip in a couple of quick ones at the end, and apologies if I misunderstood this earlier. So the 63.5 vacancies, you said some were attributable to resignations and some were because of enrollment increases. What's the split between those two? How many are attributable to enrollment?
I don't have that number before me, but I'll be happy to get that for you, Mr. Coleman.
And I guess the follow-up question I'd have to that is, what is our process for judging enrollment increases prior to the year? Because obviously the other process we want to pay attention to is how do we project and then reconcile so that we don't face issues with large number of employment or enrollment vacancies. So it'd be helpful if you'd talk us through that and how you're addressing that.
Thank you. I'll ask Dr. Preston to speak to that.
Good evening, Superintendent, Board, and we take it from planning, from Plant Services. Plant Services gives us a projection of how the classes are projected each year, and then we take that to see how many students will be in each class and how many teachers are needed in each class. Once we take those projections, we come back at the beginning of the school year to say a warm body count and see how many kids actually showed up on day one. And then we look at that and we wait till kind of near Labor Day, because that's when you see, as we take in previous data, how it has fluctuated over the years. And we've been able to take that for the last 2 years. And so what we do then is say, okay, look, if we need to move teachers here or move teachers there, that's how we do that to make sure that the students are not exceeding class size levels.
Were there, in looking at this year's data, because it seems like you've had a few weeks to process it now, were there big factors in enrollment increases either in particular schools or system-wide that really impacted our ability to estimate those effectively?
Absolutely. We had a few apartment complexes to open up other areas in their apartment complexes, so that enrollment went up. We had a shift sometime from they're in one area, we project them in this area, and they wind up in that area. So we had those and openings and closes of apartments. Yes,
and also I add our Hispanic and Latino population
absolutely
continues to grow. And I know I was thinking, maybe talking to Mr. Williams, to add the new classrooms are predominantly Hispanic and Latino. Also, and Ms. Copeland is sitting in the back, we had an increase in the number of parents who were returning to the district from private schools, as was reported several weeks ago, which is a very positive thing, because that means that parents and stakeholders are showing much more confidence in the district, seeking to become a part. Is that right, Ms. Copeland? You may want to, and Ms. Copeland is up there. You near a microphone? I might want to hear from you. Through the choice program.
I'll switch seats.
Share with the board just a statement you shared with Dr. Thompson and myself, and just anecdotally, we're seeing more and more parents choosing, or at least trying to re-enter into the DeKalb system.
Thank you. During our open enrollment season this year, which we conducted January through February, we were taking a look at the number of students who are currently enrolled in DeKalb and the number of students who are coming from home schools and private schools. And we noticed this year we had a major increase. We may have had at least, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but at least 5,500 home or private school applicants from across the district to apply to return to DeKalb schools.
No further question. I would like to make one comment. I would like to thank the superintendents for this valuable information. You've indicated to the board that there are just many variables that impact all of the decisions that we make in this great school system. And until we all understand them and get the necessary information and data, it will be helpful in making all of our decisions. I would encourage the board to learn the whole projection process. Projection is not an exact science, but it's historically in DeKalb, there have been many variables that impact the attendance in DeKalb. Many decisions have been made in the legislature in Atlanta that have impacted DeKalb in a tremendous manner. There are so many things that we need to know, and one thing we need to always focus on, and I hope the superintendent will continue to focus on, and that is that whatever we do, whatever resources we have, we need to make sure we funnel those resources to, in my opinion, one of the most important groups in this county, and that is our teachers who deliver the instructional programs in our schools and to our students. Is there any opposition to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, this item will be placed on the consent agenda.